We're here today with Roger Hall. He is a business psychologist and PhD. He's also the author of Staying Happy, Being Productive. Hi, Roger. Thanks for being with us today.
Hey, I'm grateful for the invitation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our viewers, can you give them a little bit of a background on yourself so they kind of have an understanding of where you're coming from?
Yeah, I am a business psychologist. I do executive coaching, leadership development with entrepreneurs, professionals. I got my PhD from Ohio State in 1991 and have currently got clients from Hawaii to New York City and Montana to Fort Lauderdale. So I've got people all over the country. I do a lot of remote work. So working with people, and it seems like the last 3 weeks, it's all been about the coronavirus crisis.
Yeah, we're all feeling a whole bunch of different things, dealing with the, coronavirus and our world changing. And, it'd be really good to kind of get your insight on the psychology of all of this and what we're going through. And one of the things that, we have been hearing over and over is the way that managers are managing their people and the way that people are interpreting their coworkers. They kind of get into, either they're micromanaging or they're not giving as much detail as they need to. Can you tell us a little bit about, kind of like the fear aspect and control aspect of that mentality?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I've noticed is, if you watch the media, if you're on the internet, besides getting sourdough recipes, it's pretty much all about how much bad stuff is going to happen. And it's the job of the news to scare us to death. Nobody's going to watch the news if it's happy stories all day long. So we get sucked into that, and it creates fear. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that, but it creates a lot of fear in us. And fear and control are inextricably linked. They're always tied together. So if you got little kids, if you got toddlers in the house, and you're afraid legitimately that your kid's going to stick a fork in the outlet, what do? Well, you control the environment by putting one of those blockers on it. And so anytime we're afraid of something, we attempt to control it. And so if you've got a boss who is a micromanager and you say they're controlling, there are two reasons for that. One is they're not really a micromanager. You're just probably not very good at your job and they have to manage you. But the other option is that they are a micromanager. They're afraid of an outcome. And it may be legitimate or it may not be legitimate. And so when people get anxious, they attempt to control it. So they'll start taking over your work because they're afraid it's not going to turn out right. But we try to control all kinds of things. And when the fear is legitimate, then it's okay to control it. Like with your toddler, you manage things. But if you've got a 27-year-old and you've still got the little outlet covers on, that's probably not a legitimate fear. And because they're afraid, they gather information. When we shift to information gathering, we start trying to gather as much information as possible. Now, my favorite example of this, and I believe my occupational hazard is this, is I believe God put everybody on this earth for my entertainment. So if I'm out in public, I'm always watching people. So if I'm at a train station or a subway station or on a bus line, where are people looking? They're either looking at their phone or they're looking to where the bus or the train is coming from. They don't control the bus or train, but they so much want to know when is it coming that they'll spend 5 minutes looking down the line that gives them like an 8-second advantage over the people who are looking at their phone. What this illustrates is we spend a ton of time when we're afraid or unsure, and we are in a period of uncertainty, gathering information to help us be more certain. And so we'll spend 5 minutes for an 8-second advantage, and some of the people who are watching this Zoomcast, they know they've spent 3 hours on the internet comparing all the state agencies' estimates and the worldwide estimates and trying to map out. Because they're afraid, they gather information. Another great example of this is the Weather Channel. We don't control the weather, which is why the Weather Channel exists, so that we can find out in advance what's going to happen. And I don't really have a high maintenance haircut, but rain really doesn't screw up most of my life. But yet we still want to know because we're afraid some bad thing will happen. So when you're in the work situation, you'll see people, because they're afraid, become more controlling, and they're going to ask for tons more information because they think that increased information will make them feel better. Now here's the downside. It doesn't. It only amps up the anxiety. So the more you attempt to have control and the more information you gather doesn't actually make you feel less anxious. It makes you feel more anxious. So my encouragement to people is do not a media fast, but a media diet, and decide in advance of the day, I'm gonna consume information about the pandemic for this long at this time of the day and at that time of the day, because the rest of the day not really much is going to change, is it? I mean, we kind of know what's going to happen. So that's how fear and control are connected.
Yeah, that bridges nicely into the term show-busyness that we would like to talk about a little bit. The idea that people feel the need to really show their worth, in times like this. Can you kind of speak about, the psychology of that a little bit?
Well, so the show busyness is people attempting to regain control of a situation they don't have control of. They recognize that in their business or in other business, people have been furloughed. If you're in retail, you've just been laid off. If you're in the restaurant business, you're really, really hurting. Because of that, they think, okay, what do I have in my control to secure my job so that I don't get furloughed? And so they start doing things. The unfortunate thing is, and I love the term show busyness, is you start doing things that are ineffective, but they're active. And we do this when we're afraid. And one of the reasons is the parts of our brain that help us solve problems creatively get turned off when we're afraid. So let me give you this example. You're out taking a hike in a nice park, and because you're in love, you're writing a poem for your beloved, and so you're trying to come up with a rhyme. And because of what's going on, you're doing some math in your head and some long division, and you're walking along and you're able to do those things. And then you see a mountain lion. Then what happens? Now, if you're like me, you start running. And I've been told that's not the proper response. But for our story, you start running. Now, let me ask the follow-up question. What happens to your ability to do long division and come up with a rhyme? It completely evaporates. So what we have is people at their workplace afraid. That activates a part of their brain called the limbic system and two particular structures called the amygdala that help you run away from mountain lions. That's what those structures are there for. And that part of your brain operates very, very quickly. And it sends signals up to the part of your brain right above your eyes called the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain that solves complex problems. Now, when I'm running away from a mountain lion, what happens? All of this turns off. Okay, so the amygdala sends signals to shut down poems and long division. So let's take it to the workplace. You're concerned about being furloughed. You're concerned about job security. You're concerned about your paycheck. So you start amping up fear, but you're shutting down the parts of your brain that help you determine what's the most effective, what's the most productive. And then you start doing things that your brain is able to do, but they're not really productive. So we see lots of people engaging in busy activities that don't really move the ball forward because their brain is too anxious.
You had mentioned before how just things like this and Zoom can just be exhausting, and we're kind of like living in this world where now we're all talking digitally, and, maybe tell us why it's so exhausting, and kind of, what we can do about it.
Well, so when you're in a real meeting with real people, okay, how are you arranged? You're usually arranged around a table. And so there are certain people on your side that are not looking at you at every second. And everybody's looking at different places, and you can tell where people are looking, and you can monitor that. When we're doing Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is, everybody's right up on top. And so everybody's looking straight at you. And so when we're in a real meeting, we can rest, we can look away, and we can have our own private thoughts. When every eye is on us, we feel surveilled. I mean, there's an interesting experiment where they had a community coffee cup, right? And so you had to donate. If you got coffee, you had to throw money in. Well, some days they put I think a rainbow above it. In other days, they printed out cartoon eyeballs right above that thing. Guess what happened when the eyeballs were there? More donations. So when we see eyes facing us, we feel surveilled, and we feel the need to comply. All of that increases our attendant level of anxiety. So the way this is set up, everybody's looking at me. Well, I know that now. But when you're sitting around a table, people are looking up, they're looking at their paper, and you feel like not everybody's staring at me. We're not accustomed to being on camera and losing self-consciousness. So we're all self-conscious about how we look on camera. When we're sitting around in real life, we are not self-conscious because we think all of this could be being recorded, other people are surveilling us. So all of this makes us anxious and exhausted. I want to add a second thing, is we're also all learning new things. And every time we learn something, it's cognitively taxing. There's a concept called decision fatigue. And we have habits so that we don't have to decide things. Like I don't decide what toothpaste I'm going to use every morning. It's a habit. And there are 1,000 things I never decide about. Well, with all this new technology and the way we're working, everything is a new decision. And we have a daily decisional load, much like our daily push-up load. I can do X number of push-ups, then I can't do any more. Well, the same is true with our decisional load. So if we're learning new things, at the end of the day, we've capped out and we can't decide anymore. And so that's an additional factor, because when people are working at home, brand new, they don't have a ritual of, okay, now I get my cup of coffee, and now I go to the, and now I do this. Now we're trying to, those of you who have young kids, regulate their schooling and finding a quiet place and wondering if your face masks are going to be delivered or if they'll be delayed again. And, whatever it is, all of which fatigues us.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I'm thinking of all of the digital ways that we have to be able to communicate with each other. And so many of them just have so many pitfalls, like for example, like email, like you can read that and then think someone's yelling at you, but they're not. And we misinterpret that information. Can you talk about, like how we communicate like that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When we look at communication between two people, 90% of the message is not in the words. And email, I believe, is it's a tool of the devil. I mean, because it's exhausting. Because here's what happens. I get an email, and so what I have to do is write their name, comma, paragraph, and then type out my response. Then what I have to do is review it to make sure I don't have any typos and I haven't sounded stupid and I've got my commas in the right place, and all of this for like a scheduling thing. And so it's a very inefficient way to communicate, and our spell checkers will not always do us a lot of good. So like if you and I are talking about an email and you say, I need that email, and I type back, I resent that email. Well, if I said that, you would know the difference. But if I type it, I resent that email, you could read it as, I resent that email. Now, if we were speaking, we have a quick feedback loop. You look at me funny, I go, what did I say? And you would say, well, you said resent. And I said, oh, no, I said resent. We get the feedback loop, we correct the problem. If I send it to you and you read it as resent, what do? You brood on it. Well, I wonder why he resents that. He's got an attitude. And you start creating, a narrative for what just happened that takes the conversation way out of league. So it's exceedingly time consuming, very open to miscommunication. And frankly, I prefer for people to call me, because I don't have to spell check. I don't have to, make it look good. And I can get done in about 30 seconds on a phone call what it takes me 5 to 45 minutes to get accomplished in emails. And yet there are people, especially, and I'm going to throw people under the bus, HR people who say, well, we got to have it documented, right? And so they want everything with a paper trail. For the love of Mike, if your job is that insecure, you should probably look for a different job. It's a very cumbersome way to communicate. And so I encourage people, pick up the phone and resolve the problem in a third of the time.
Yeah, I'd like to speak about some things we took from your book a little bit, if that's...
Yeah, absolutely,
that's okay.
Absolutely.
One of the things that really struck me was, you had mentioned humans crave meaningful work.
Absolutely.
I'd like to talk about that a little bit, specifically like when we're thrown into an environment right now where, we're told you can't go to work, stay home. So some of us are working and some of us are trying to find something different. But maybe kind of just describe that, humans crave meaningful work concept a little bit.
So a lot of this comes from the work of a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I'm not making up his name. Let's see if I can find his book real quick. Here it is. So this is his book. It's called Flow, The Psychology of the Optimal Experience. And his name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And I actually had a Hungarian person write out how to say it without butchering his name. So he came up with the concept of flow, which is he wanted to study when people were deeply concentrating on a task where they lose the sense of time. And they would join with the work. And you've all experienced this, and most people experience it at work. You're in Cleveland, you love the Indians, but you don't experience flow at an Indians game, and definitely not at a Browns game, but that's another story. You don't experience it in entertainment, okay? You experience it when you're solving, and this is my definition, when you're solving a challenging problem in your domain of expertise. So when I'm solving people problems and thinking problems, I'm in the zone. When I'm creating new content to explain an idea, I'm in the zone. When I'm solving plumbing problems, I'm never in the zone. That creates anxiety for me. So we are all looking for meaningful work where we lose ourselves solving challenging problems. Human beings are built to solve challenging problems. And yours are creative problems, and mine are thinking and people problems. And plumbers they're thing problems, right? They're plumbing problems. And we want them to be good at it, and we want them to lose themselves in that kind of work. When we do work that doesn't seem to matter, that's demoralizing. And you've all worked on projects, and this is the hard part, especially in your business. Creatives spend a lot of time coming up with ideas that never go anywhere. And so that's got to be really hard because you don't see the fruitful product of your well-done work.
Yeah, just saying this made me, kind of think of some of your earlier comments when we were talking about, like the scenario where the cougar's chasing you or the lion. Yeah. You turn off this part of your brain. Well, to be happy, if we need to be problem solving and be really engaged, when this part of our brain turns off and we're just running, it seems like that's the opposite of what we want to be trying to do to be happy.
Yes, absolutely. And that was one of Csikszentmihalyi's findings, is that people who experience flow every day or nearly every day, and it's almost always at work, are happier than those who don't. And so if you have work that's not meaningful and doesn't get you into the zone or into flow, as he described it, then you better have a very engaging avocation after work so that you can experience it, or you need to find another job. And if we look at, this is a little off of our topic, but if we look at the Gallup survey of workplace engagement, rough numbers, 20% of people are engaged or actively engaged, 60% are kind of neutral, and then 20% are either disengaged or actively disengaged. So if you look at that, it seems like only 20% of the workforce is really loving their work, and they're the ones who are pulling everything along. 60% are along for the ride, showing up, doing their job, not really liking it, and 20% are throwing wrenches in the machines. And so I would much rather have people find the work that they love, or at least that they tolerate, so that their avocation can be where they experience flow. But monitor yourself. When do you lose yourself in a task? And that's something where you can experience flow.
Yeah, there's another interesting thing in your book that I would love to talk about, and it's the guy that you named him Rick. You mentioned it's probably a different name.
Not Rick.
Yeah. I took two things from that. One was, don't judge a book by its cover, but also the idea of, kind of like the reinvention, and, it's okay to move on and try something different and be successful with that. And I think that's a pretty, apropos thing to talk about with today's environment, where I think a lot of people might have to reinvent themselves or think differently, on how they're, approaching the work world. So maybe you can talk a little bit about quotes, Rick.
Yeah, so he's a friend of mine, a very good friend who I've known for years, and he worked with me at a place where he signed on as the janitor, and I really didn't have a lot. I thought, isn't it too bad that this guy has to become our janitor? And then I started talking to him, and he was working part-time at a video store, and I didn't think much of that. But it wasn't long before I started figuring out, this guy's got a ton on the ball. And I said, why are you working as our janitor? And he said, I like to work. I got to keep busy, and I don't have enough to keep me busy. And so all the time when he was working, he was coming up with new ideas. So he opened his own video store, and then he had a vending machine route, and then he sold the video store and the vending machine route, and then moved to another state and managed, took a job as a cashier at a truck stop. And then within a very short period of time, he's running the truck stop. And so he's managing it, and it's kind of a destination in the state where he lives. People like to stop there because he's made it awesome. And so everything he touched, he would try to make it better. And his whole goal was, how do I have fun every day? How do I serve people? How do I do the things that I enjoy and be around people that I like? And so he liked working at the video store, and then he made his own video store, and the list goes on. And so he was and still is so good at monitoring the things he likes. And then he has the advantage of he doesn't have really high needs, right? I mean, he lives by all outward appearances a pretty modest life, but that gives him lots and lots of freedom. But he's probably one of the most successful people I know, because he's happy every day. He's got great relationships, and he's providing service to people, and everybody loves to be around him. I mean, and so I encourage people, monitor yourself. What is it that you really love to do? Where do you really come alive?
Yeah, then there was another comment here, and I'm just going to read it because I thought it was pretty profound. It was, it's not the adversity that causes the consequence; it's our belief about the adversity. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that and what that means?
Yeah, so this goes back really millennia ago, and the philosophy of the Stoics, the ancient Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. These are people who said it's not really our situation that makes us unhappy, it's how we think about our situation. And there's a famous line that Shakespeare wrote in Hamlet, and he said, "Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." And so in the 1960s, a guy named Albert Ellis, he's one of the founders of cognitive behavioral therapy. And Ellis said, he came up with this ABC model, and he said, the A stands for the adversity or the activating event, and the C stands for the consequence, usually the emotional consequence. And the language we use, and we use the coronavirus, is we have a worldwide pandemic and our state is shut down. Consequence, that's freaking me out. I'm afraid. And that's the language we use. Well, in reality, what Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Shakespeare, and Albert Ellis said is it's not the adversity, it's our belief about the adversity. So if you believe, oh, I'm going to get this disease, I'm going to end up in the hospital dead, everybody I love is going to end up dead, I'm going to, it's going to be a zombie apocalypse, and we imagine these negative things, well, then the consequence is, yeah, I'm going to be afraid. If the adversity comes and we believe, wow, this is difficult, but I've handled difficult things before, our nation has handled difficult things before, and we've figured it out. And as bad as it may have been, it's never as bad as the prognosticators say it's going to be. Consequence. Well, I'm a little nervous, but I'm not freaking out. And so it's important that the belief that you have is based on evidence and is more productive. So if I was to say worldwide pandemic, state is shut down, I'm going to think about puppies and kittens and unicorns and, that's not going to help you. That might help you feel better, but it's not based in reality. So it's important that you base those beliefs on evidence.
We had a couple of questions from some of our audience here, and one of them kind of goes along those lines. And this is Matt asked, what are some things creatives working from home can do to help inspire their creativity?
You're going to hate what I'm going to say, which is you need to be bored. And I'm going to get nerdy here, but I'm going to bring it home, which is when we're focused on a task, certain parts of our brain are active. But when our mind is wandering, another set of structures turns on, and our brains are actually more active when our mind is wandering. And it happens to all of us. And the researchers call it the default mode network, which is the network of brain structures that go into place by default. So in our default mode is to have our mind wandering. Well, if we're all freaking out, if we're all trying to be super, super busy, our brain never gets into that state. Now, when does that usually happen for most of us? Well, it happens when we're relaxed, when we're not focused on solving a problem right now. So for most of us, that's in the shower, which is why your best ideas come in the shower. You're relaxed, you know how to do it, nobody's rushing you, and you're able then to come up with your creative ideas. So creatives, you have, I think, some very difficult, it's about the muse, right? How do I get the muse? Well, part of it is being bored, because you can't chase the muse. You can't chase creativity. It's got to come to you, but you've got to prepare your mind for it. So I encourage creatives to spend time in quiet reflection, and you can call that meditation, contemplation, quiet reflection. If you're from Oklahoma, you can call it pondering. I don't care. Whatever you call it, but spend time in that quiet reflection, because that's when the ideas will come to you. And if you're a creative, when you're trying to force an idea, it's never as good as when it comes to you. The second thing is get plenty of sleep, because every night when you're sleeping, your brain is actually, there's the cerebrospinal fluid, there's like a little bit of a wave action going. And that wave action when you're asleep clears, because you don't have blood going through your head to get rid of all the gunk in your, the cells and the toxicity. And so your cerebrospinal fluid has to do this wave thing to wash out all the gunk that builds up in our brain. So plenty of sleep, time of quiet reflection, and that's going to help your brain work better. And lack of fear, because if you've got the amygdala firing, you can't be creative.
It's so funny you said those three things, because I'm looking at like our next question, from Julie, who you probably already answered it within that. She asked, can you share some traits that you found in your research of highly successful people? And I guarantee you're probably going to say sleep, calm your mind, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll take a slightly different angle. It is really about mental control, which is, the ability to delay gratification. Self-control is the number one thing. And I'm going to recommend another book. Here it is. It's called Willpower. And it's written by Roy Baumeister and John Tierney. And it's called Rediscovering the Greatest Human Strength. And it's a great read. I mean, if you guys have the library, get it on audio. It's on audio. Or if you have Audible, you can get it on Audible as well. And what we know is that people who have self-control, that is the first strength, is self-control. It's telling yourself no when you want to say yes.
I'm just looking up at the clock here, and we're running a little bit long. So if someone wanted to reach out or get your book or contact you, is there...
Sure, yeah. If you want to reach me, probably the easiest way is Roger, R-O-G-E-R, at drrogerhall.com. So drrogerhall.com. That's probably the easiest one to remember. I've got a website if you want little shorter videos on these same topics. I've got a YouTube site called the Dr. Roger Hall YouTube site. If you are interested in the book, it's available on Amazon. It's an Audible book as well. And if you guys use Libby from your library, request your library to order it, because it's available through the libraries. So you can buy it on Amazon, you can get it on Audible. It's available on whatever the iTunes store is where you download books. All of that stuff is available.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks again. And on behalf of our entire audience, we really appreciate you taking the time to give us this information. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful for the invitation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.